Namaskar and welcome to Global Scan. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. This is your one-stop destination for a roundup of all major international developments of the week. As the pandemic rages on, it is a race against time for nations to vaccinate their people. We'll take a closer look at the countries worst hit by the COVID and what are they doing about it. In other news, historic judgment in the murder case of George Floyd in the United States. India-US Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership at the Leaders Summit on climate, and NASA's rover continues to scale new milestones on the Red Planet. All that and more in Global Scan. Let's get started with the top stories. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds internal meeting on measures to tackle Covid-19 pandemic. Also interacts with chief ministers of high-burden states with leading oxygen manufacturers of India via video conferencing. US President Joe Biden announces tax credits to certain businesses that provide paid time off for their employees to get Covid-19 shots. Spain will offer between 5% to 10% of its Covid-19 vaccine shots to Latin American and Caribbean countries this year. Denmark to reopen the economy weeks earlier than planned. Black man shot dead by police serving warrant. North Carolina state officials open investigation into the fatal shooting by local sheriff's deputies, serving him with a search warrant. Demand to free Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny erupts across Russia. France warns Russia. Foreign minister says that European Union would hold President Vladimir Putin and Russian authorities responsible if hunger-striking criminal critic Alexei Navalny dies, and the bloc would impose new sanctions. NASA achieves another milestone, flies a craft on another planet for the first time, scores Wright brothers moment as it sends its miniature robot helicopter Ingenuity buzzing over the surface of Mars for nearly 40 seconds, marking the first powered control flight of an aircraft on another planet. Perseverance Mars rover extracts first oxygen from the Red Planet. And in our big story, let's take stock of the COVID situation. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired high-level meeting on COVID-19 situation with chief ministers of 11 states and union territories that have reported maximum number of cases recently. Noting that the virus is affecting several states as well as Tier 2, Tier 3 cities at once, Prime Minister called for working together to fight the pandemic with collective power. He said the biggest basis of India's success during the first wave of the pandemic was the united efforts and united strategy, and reiterated that we will have to address this challenge in the same way. Prime Minister assured centre's full support to all the states in this fight. He added that Ministry of Health is also in touch with the states and is monitoring the situation closely and issuing necessary advices to states from time to time. On oxygen supply, Prime Minister took note of the points raised by the states. He said there is continuous efforts to increase oxygen supply. All the concerned departments and ministries of the government are also working together. Industrial oxygen has also been diverted to meet immediate requirements. Prime Minister urged all states to work together and coordinate with one another to fulfill requirements relating to medicines and oxygen. He urged the states to check hoarding and black marketing of oxygen and medicines. PM said that every state should ensure that no oxygen tanker, whether it is meant for any state, is stopped or gets stranded. He urged the states to set up a high-level coordination committee to carry oxygen to different hospitals of the state. The coordination committee should ensure that as soon as there is allotment of oxygen from the centre, it can deliver oxygen as per requirement in different hospitals of the state immediately. And US President Joe Biden on Monday declared that every American aged 16 and above is now eligible to get COVID-19 vaccination. The announcement comes weeks after President Biden wrote on Twitter that by April 19th, every adult will be eligible to be vaccinated. At least a dozen states opened eligibility to anyone 16 years and above on last Monday alone, while New Jersey and Oregon announced late last week that all residents 16 years and older will become eligible by April 19th. The president had earlier announced that 90% of adults would be eligible for one of the 3 approved COVID-19 vaccines in the days ahead, in addition to having a vaccination site within 5 miles of their homes. In a video message, US President Biden said that COVID-19 vaccination is free, safe, and it's how we're going to bring this pandemic to an end.
For months, I've been telling Americans to get vaccinated when it's your turn. Well, it's your turn now. Starting tomorrow, all adults are eligible to get their shot. It's free, it's convenient, and it's the most important thing you can do to protect yourself from COVID-19, including the new variants we're seeing, to protect your loved ones, to help our economy recover, and to help get things back to normal. Look, we're making tremendous progress, but we're still in the race against this virus, and we need to vaccinate tens of millions more Americans.
And the COVID-19 vaccine developed by Pfizer and BioNTech is effective at preventing symptomatic and severe disease in people with some chronic illnesses like diabetes and heart disease. The analysis of almost 1.2 million people by Israel's largest healthcare provider will offer further hope for countries as they scramble to get shots in citizens' arms, particularly those considered vulnerable. The Claret Research Institute study says the vaccine was 80% effective against symptomatic infection for people with heart or chronic kidney disease, 86% of people with type 2 diabetes, 75% for cerebrovascular disease, 84% of people suffering from immunodeficiency. More than half of Israel's population has been fully inoculated since the country's world-beating vaccination drive began in late December. Hundreds of passengers from Australia began arriving in New Zealand airports on Monday after authorities reopened the borders, a pandemic milestone that allows quarantine-free travel between the countries for the first time in over a year. Though most Australian states had allowed quarantine-free visits from New Zealand residents since late last year, New Zealand had enforced isolation from arrivals from its neighbours, citing concerns about sporadic virus outbreaks. More in this report.
Excitement was clearly visible in them, and finally, when the moment arrived, it was all tears and hugs. As the first flight from New Zealand arrived, everyone was eagerly waiting to meet their loved ones following the commencement of the two-way travel bubble between the countries. Emotional scenes were witnessed at the airports, with families reuniting and scores of passengers thronging the international departure terminals at the Australian airports.
16 months! She's my stepdaughter, she's only 12 and her dad doesn't even have any idea that she's here yet. They're surprising him.
No, I did not. I haven't been excited, I haven't looked forward, I haven't planned anything because I just didn't think it was going to happen. But we're here, so.
Been away since November 2019 and both his parents passed away while he was gone, so we haven't seen him for a long time, so we're very excited.
Oh, amazing. It's been nearly 2 years and I haven't seen my partner for that period of time, so it's been very tough. Yeah, really tough.
Though most Australian states have allowed quarantine-free visits from New Zealand residents since late last year, quarantine was mandatory in New Zealand on their return, deterring many from travelling to Australia. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison and New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said in a joint statement that the open border will help drive the economic recovery for both countries and reunite thousands with families and friends. Both Australia and New Zealand had largely closed their borders to non-citizens and permanent residents more than a year ago. With Bureau Inputs, DD India.
And let's now take a broad look at the worst hit countries by COVID. We're looking at 5 countries who are worst affected by COVID-19. We'll look at the numbers and the number of active cases and casualties that have come into place. The worst affected continues to be United States. Right here, America is the worst affected country with over 3.3 crore cases, Over 5.8 lakh casualties, deaths have been recorded so far. Moving on to the country that is scaled to number 2 in a very short span of time. We're talking about India. Over 1.6 crore cases have been recorded. A very sharp surge in the recent weeks. Over 1.8 lakh casualties so far have also been recorded in the country. From India, we go across to Brazil. That was also one of the most worst affected, COVID affected country in the world. Some 1.4 crore COVID cases have been recorded so far, and over 3.8 lakh deaths. The casualty figure in particular makes it perform very poorly as far as COVID management is concerned. Going to the next country, we're talking about Europe, which had taken the brunt of the first wave of the COVID-19. France is where some 54 lakh cases of COVID have been recorded so far. There have been many recoveries as well. Over 1 lakh casualties have also been recorded in France, if we talk about the COVID impact in different countries. And finally, the fifth country which is worst affected is Russia. Over 47 lakh cases have been recorded in Russia so far, and over 1 lakh casualties. So those were 5 worst affected countries across the world. If you look at in totality, across the world, over 14.5 crore cases of COVID-19 have been recorded so far. Talk about the casualties. Over 30 lakh people have died world over due to the infection. And on the silver lining side, the recovered cases are also over 12 crore. So that is what the figure stands at if we look at the world as a whole. Let's now move on next, the countries that we looked at. Let's see what is being done to handle the situation. Talking about the worst hit countries, we first talk about United States. Some 200 million COVID-19 vaccination shots have been delivered. This was also the promise of the first 100 days of the Biden administration. He's also said that free vaccine for everyone above 16 years is older. That is to vaccinate every adult in America. Interestingly, United States also leads in COVID-19 casualties. We just saw the figures, but it was also racing ahead as far as vaccination is concerned, and therefore the death rate is coming down significantly as far as United States is concerned. However, there is a surge in infection rates in some parts of America while the vaccination drive is on. Michigan in particular, a younger population there is getting affected of COVID-19. Moving on to the next country which has seen a very sharp rise, India. Sharp rise of COVID-19, the second wave of COVID-19, and the health infrastructure has come under great pressure in the country. And we'll talk about the manner in which the focus is on oxygen and medicine availability. Remdesivir is the medicine that is in question in particular. In fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is monitoring the situation very closely, close interaction with all stakeholders, chief ministers, doctors, pharma, vaccine companies, to make sure that all stakeholders work together in cohesion. Also, world's largest vaccination drive is taking place in the country. So far as we speak, 130 million doses of COVID vaccination have been delivered in India, while it battles one of the largest and the sharpest rise in COVID-19 cases in the country. Moving on, we're talking about the countries worst affected by COVID-19. Next, we talk about Brazil. India overtook Brazil recently, but Brazil still is battling the spike in cases. Highly contagious Japan variant of virus is causing the damage as we speak in the recent weeks. Talking about Brazil, there are also a political side to the COVID pandemic. There are large-scale protests taking place against President Bolsonaro's administration for their mishandling of the COVID pandemic. Moving on, talking about Brazil, the manner in which they're facing the challenge, there is also lack of access to COVID vaccination, and places where the vaccination is taking place, the pace is also slow. That is also leading to the fast spreading of the virus. Another impact in a developing country like Brazil is that poverty has risen significantly in the months of the pandemic. The hunger index in Brazil is the highest since 2004. People don't just have less access to COVID treatment and vaccination, but also food and monetary benefits are also choking up as far as Brazil is concerned. We're talking about the countries worst affected by COVID-19 and how they're dealing with it. Talking about France, it is faring relatively well. It is in fact as per their administration, towards the end of the third wave of COVID pandemic. We know that large-scale restrictions have been prevalent in France. The vaccination drive is also moving ahead fast. Some 14 million people received the first vaccination shot in the coming days. The number is expected to increase significantly. We know that strict restrictions were in place in France. Restaurants, cafes and bars have been shut, in fact, since last year in October. But those restrictions are expected to be relieved now. Travel restrictions will in fact be released from early next month, according to the administration, if the numbers show a productive decline as far as COVID cases is concerned. And from France, we're going to talk about the other country, which is Russia. More than 8 million people have been vaccinated in Russia as far as the vaccination drive to fight the brunt of COVID-19 is concerned. In fact, to promote vaccination and encourage more people to come forward to get vaccination, there is also a reward program in Russia for senior citizens to come forward and get vaccinated and protect themselves and protect their loved ones. And talking about Russia, Russian-made Sputnik vaccine has also gained significant popularity in the recent week. We've seen India, France, Germany is also in talks to procure the Sputnik vaccination that has been manufactured and developed in Russia. Interestingly, not just for people, Russia has also come ahead and announced a vaccination for pets, for animals that can be used to protect your pet and animals that are around human civilizations, to make sure that the infections do not spread any further. So broadly, those were the countries those are facing the worst brunt of COVID-19 pandemic and the manner in which they're dealing with the challenge. Let's now look at news from the Americas. Now, in the recent incidents of shooting in the US, Austin police on Sunday confirmed that the suspect in the shooting deaths of 3 persons is a former police detective, and also confirmed it being a domestic situation as to reduce the massive police presence in the area. In the meantime, in another state of United States, 3 people were killed, 2 injured in a shooting at a bar in Kenosha County of Wisconsin early on Sunday.
It was a violent weekend in the United States. US was once again rocked by back-to-back shootings. 3 multiple shootings were reported in the United States in just 24 hours. 5 people were hospitalized after being shot and injured in Shreveport, Louisiana. 1 victim was shot in the head, while another suffered multiple gunshot wounds. That's not all. Earlier on Sunday, 3 people had died at an apartment complex in Austin, Texas, and authorities were hunting for a former deputy sheriff wanted in connection with the fatal shooting. Separately, 3 people were killed and 2 wounded in a shooting at a bar in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, in the early hours on the same day. United States is already on the edge over a surge in shootings in recent weeks. The spate of shootings has increased public pressure to tighten the gun regulations. Most Americans support tougher gun laws reportedly. United States has been rocked by deadly shootings of late. President Joe Biden and his Attorney General Merrick Garland announced limited measures to tackle gun violence in the United States on April the 8th, in what the White House described as a first step to curb mass shootings, community bloodshed, and suicides. The new measures include plans for the Justice Department to crack down on self-assembled ghost guns and make stabilizing braces, which effectively turn pistols into rifles, subject to registration under the National Firearms Act. Biden said he will also ask the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives to release an annual report on firearms trafficking in the United States and make it easier for the states to adopt red flag laws that flag at-risk individuals who own guns. With Bureau inputs, DD India.
And in yet another incident of shooting, North Carolina state officials have opened an investigation into the fatal shooting of a black man in his car by local sheriff's deputies serving him a search warrant. The shooting unfolded on Wednesday morning in Elizabeth City, a riverfront town of about 18,000 residents in Pasco-Tank County, near North Carolina's coastal border, with Virginia, and small groups of protesters took to the streets by evening. Authorities identified the man who was slain as Andrew Brown Jr., a resident of Elizabeth City, and said only that he was shot when sheriff's deputies tried to serve him with a search warrant. US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have called the conviction of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd a step forward towards a more just America, but emphasized more must be done. Chauvin was found guilty on all three charges: second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree unintentional murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Floyd's killing last year had sparked worldwide protest and a reckoning on the race in the US.
It was a stunning moment in history when the much-awaited verdict was finally delivered. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was convicted on the 20th of April of murdering George Floyd. A 12-member jury found Chauvin guilty of all three charges of second-degree murder, third-degree murder and manslaughter after considering 3 weeks of testimony from 45 witnesses, including bystanders, police officials and medical experts. In a confrontation captured on video, Chauvin, a white veteran of the police force, pushed his knee into the neck of Floyd, a 46-year-old black man in handcuffs, for more than 9 minutes on 25th May 2020. Chauvin and 3 fellow officers were attempting to arrest Floyd, accused of using a fake $20 bill to buy cigarettes at a grocery store. Chauvin, wearing a grey suit with a blue tie as well as a light blue face mask, nodded and stood quickly when the judge ruled that his bail was revoked. He was taken out of the courtroom in handcuffs and placed in the custody of Hennepin County Sheriff. This conviction triggered a wave of relief and reflection not only across the United States but across the globe. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of several hundred people erupted in cheers when the verdict was announced. At George Floyd Square in Minneapolis, the intersection where Floyd was killed and which was later named in his honor, people screamed, applauded, and some threw dollar bills in the air in celebration. US President Joe Biden, reacting to the verdict, said it is not enough and we can't stop here.
I feel relieved today that I finally have the opportunity for hopefully getting some sleep. A lot of days that I prayed and I hoped and I was speaking everything into existence. I said I have faith that he will be convicted. He was the first George Floyd. But today, you have the cameras all around the world to see and show what happened to my brother. It was a motion picture, the world seeing his life being extinguished. And I could do nothing but watch.
It was a murder in the full light of day, and it ripped the blinders off for the whole world to see. The systemic racism the Vice President just referred to. The systemic racism is a stain on our nation's soul. The knee on the neck of justice for Black Americans. Profound fear and trauma. The pain, the exhaustion that Black and brown Americans experience every single day. No one should be above the law. And today's verdict sends that message. But it's not enough. We can't stop here. In order to deliver real change and reform, we can and we must do more to reduce the likelihood that tragedies like this will ever happen and occur again. To ensure that Black and brown people, or anyone, so they don't fear the interactions with law enforcement, that they don't have to wake up knowing that they can lose their very life in the course of just living their life.
Today, we feel a sigh of relief. Still, it cannot take away the pain. A measure of justice isn't the same as equal justice. This verdict brings us a step closer, and the fact is, we still have work to do. We still must reform the system.
Chauvin could now face up to 40 years in prison. The Minneapolis jurors found that Chauvin had crossed the line and used excessive force. Under Minnesota sentencing guidelines, Chauvin faces 12.5 years in prison for his murder conviction as a first-time criminal offender. Floyd's death prompted protests against racism and police brutality in many US cities and other countries last summer, even as the world grappled with the coronavirus pandemic. The Minneapolis Police Department fired Chauvin and 3 other officers the day after Floyd's murder. The 3 others are due to face trial later this year on aiding and abetting charges. With Bureau Inputs, DD India.
Moving on, NASA's experimental helicopter Ingenuity rose into thin air above the dusty red surface of Mars on Monday, achieving the first powered flight by an aircraft on another planet. The triumph was hailed as a Wright brothers moment. It was a brief hop, just 39 seconds and about 10 feet, but accomplished all the major milestones. As per the latest reports, in fact, NASA's Mars helicopter has soared higher and longer on the second flight as well.
April 19th was a historic day for NASA. The small rotorcraft made history, hovering above Jezero crater, demonstrating that powered, controlled flight on another planet is possible.
Well, our team has been working over 6 years, some even longer, towards that dream of experimenting the first ever flight at Mars, and this morning our dream came true. It looks easy. I would like to take this opportunity to remind how difficult it is to fly a rotorcraft at Mars. First and foremost, because the atmosphere there is so thin, right? About 1% compared to that at Earth. That's like on Earth being elevation 3 times the height of Himalayas. So the air is very thin, and Ingenuity had to be really light, small, and has to be able to fly in this thin atmosphere and survive on its own. It did all of that under 4 pounds.
NASA scored a 21st century Wright brothers moment as it sent its miniature robot helicopter Ingenuity buzzing above the surface of Mars for nearly 40 seconds, marking the first powered controlled flight of an aircraft on another planet.
This really is a Wright brothers moment. It's the start of a whole new kind of planetary exploration, and we'll build on Ingenuity's success to see how we can deploy this capability on future Mars missions. We have this evolution of exploring planets in the solar system. First we do a flyby, then we'll do an orbiter mission, then we'll do a lander mission, then we'll land a rover, and now we've added another evolutional capability there, flight on another planet. Ingenuity was a technology demonstration, an experimental mission, but its success is truly remarkable, and it gives us this new capability.
The solar-powered helicopter first became airborne at 12:33 local mean solar time, that is Mars time, a time the Ingenuity team determined would have optimal energy and flight conditions. Altimeter data indicate Ingenuity climbed to its prescribed maximum altitude of 10 feet, that is 3 meters, and maintained a stable hover for 30 seconds. It then descended, touching back down on the surface of Mars after logging a total of 39.1 seconds of flight. Ingenuity was developed as a technology demonstration separate from Perseverance's primary mission to search for traces of ancient microorganisms and collect samples of Martian rock for eventual return to Earth for further analysis. With the helicopter's first outing deemed a success, NASA plans to send the aircraft on several additional, progressively more ambitious flights in the weeks ahead. With Bureau Inputs, DD India.
And in yet another development, NASA on Wednesday announced that its Perseverance rover has extracted the first sample of oxygen from Mars. The 6-wheeled robot has converted a sample of the red planet's carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere into oxygen through an instrument aboard the rover known as Mars Oxygen In Situ Research Utilization Experiment, or MOXIE. According to NASA, this first conversion of carbon dioxide to oxygen could open up possibilities for further experimentation towards the goal of seeing humans on Mars in the future. As per the space agency, Mars' atmosphere is some 96% carbon dioxide. NASA called the first MOXIE conversion quite modest, at 5 grams equivalent to 10 minutes of breathable oxygen. NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Southern California, which is managed by NASA by the Caltech in Pasadena, California, built and manages operations of the Perseverance rover. Let's now look at news from Europe. Free Navalny protest marches took place in Russian cities, calling for release of the Kremlin critic, even as diplomatic pressure increased on Russia, with France's foreign minister saying that the European Union would hold President Vladimir Putin, Russian authorities responsible if the hunger-striking Navalny dies, and it could pave way for new sanctions on Russia.
The demand to free Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny erupted across Russia. Police arrested many protesters as Russians in dozens of cities took part in rallies organized by allies. Demonstrations were called to be held in more than 100 cities. Protesters in central Moscow chanted, "Freedom to Navalny," and let the doctors in. Navalny's wife Yulia also joined the rally in the capital, where demonstrators chanted her name. As the rallies broke out across the country, heavy police presence was also spotted nationwide. Navalny's spokeswoman was jailed for 10 days and another close ally detained. This on the same day that President Vladimir Putin delivered a State of the Nation speech warning the West not to cross Russia's red lines and pointedly made no mention of Navalny. France's foreign minister told Russia on Thursday that the European Union would hold President Vladimir Putin and Russian authorities responsible if hunger-striking Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny died, and said the bloc would impose new sanctions.
Dérive autoritaire interne.
We will take the necessary sanctions and we will hold Mr. Putin and Russian authorities responsible for this tragedy. I hope we won't get to that extreme. There is an internal authoritarian shift. This relentless attack on Navalny is unbearable. It's the symbol of an internal authoritarian shift. The fact that yesterday protesters were arrested because they were protesting in support of Mr. Navalny, and the mere fact that even Mr. Navalny's health is in danger.
US Embassy officials in Moscow also met Russian officials on Wednesday to discuss topics that included Russia's response to the latest US sanctions.
US Embassy officials in Moscow met today with Russian officials to discuss various bilateral topics, including the Russian response to our announcement last week on April 15th. We expect these discussions will continue in the coming days. We'll review the details of the Russian actions as we were notified officially of some elements today. At the same time, we continue to believe that the best way forward is through thoughtful dialogue and diplomatic engagement going forward.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on Wednesday said that President Biden never said that he expected that one set of sanctions on Russia would immediately change behavior.
Well, first, our sanctions were put in place, and many of them done in coordination with our European partners and allies, because our strong view and the view of the global community is that there should be consequences for actions. We have never expected, nor have we projected, that one set of sanctions or any individual set of sanctions is going to immediately change behavior. But it is sending a clear message that behavior is unacceptable and it can't continue. I would also remind you that our consequences, as we've long said, many are seen, sanctions, and some are unseen, and we don't speak about more specifically.
UN human rights experts urged Moscow to let Navalny be medically evaluated abroad. They said they believed his life was in danger as he was being held in conditions that could amount to torture. The 44-year-old Kremlin critic, who last year survived a nerve agent attack that Russian authorities denied carrying out, is thin and weak after starving himself for 3 weeks in prison, and his allies say he risks kidney failure or cardiac arrest. The confrontation over Navalny's fate is a flashpoint in Moscow's dire relations with the West. It is already aggravated by economic sanctions and diplomatic expulsions. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
And European parliamentarians on Thursday voted on a motion to seek, through the Council of Europe's governing body, the Committee of Ministers, the release of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. A total of 106 MEPs voted in favor of the recommendation, 24 against it, while 10 abstained. French MEP and author of the report on which the recommendation is based said if Navalny dies in prison, it will be a consequence of the Russian authorities' decision in full conscience. The decision is based on European Courts of Human Rights ruling in the case of Navalny versus Russia. Navalny was arrested in January when he returned to Russia and jailed for some 2.5 years in February. Let's now shift focus to Asia. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the Leaders' Summit on Climate hosted by US President Joe Biden. Prime Minister Modi said climate change is a lived reality for millions around the world. He said that concrete action is needed for humanity to combat climate change. He also added that India is doing its part.
Climate change is a lived reality for millions around the world. Their lives and livelihoods are already facing its adverse consequences. Friends, for humanity to combat climate change, concrete action is needed. We need such action at a high speed, on a large scale, and with a global scope. We in India are doing our part. Our ambitious renewable energy target of 450 gigawatts by 2030 shows our commitment.
And Prime Minister Modi also added that as a climate responsible developing country, India welcomes partners to create templates of sustainable development in the country. He also said, along with President Biden, is launching the India-US Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership.
As a climate responsible developing country, India welcomes partners to create templates of sustainable development in India. This can also help other developing countries who need affordable access to green finance and clean technologies. That is why President Biden and I are launching the India-US Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership. Together, we will help mobilize investments, demonstrate clean technology, and enable green collaborations.
And Japan raised its target for cutting carbon emissions to 46% by 2030, responding to pressure from United States and domestic companies and environmentalists who criticize its previous goal of 26% as unambitious. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga announced the new targets compared with 2013 emission levels hours before the start of a virtual summit on climate change called by US President Joe Biden. Suga said that achieving the new 2030 target would not be easy, but he said he would instruct ministers to accelerate plans on climate change responses, and the government would continue trying for an even higher cut of 50%. Late last year, Suga set a goal of carbon neutrality by 2050, bringing Japan more in line with some other countries. Let's now track the news and developments from Africa. Interim President General Mahamat Idris Deby said that Chad will see free and democratic elections in 18 months in his first public comments since taking power. The son of Chad's slain leader, Idris Deby, took over as president and armed forces commander on Wednesday as rebel forces threatened to march into the capital, deepening the turmoil, a country vital to international efforts to combat Islamist militants in Africa. General Deby moved to consolidate his position with a transitional council of military officers issuing a new charter in place of the constitution, granting him the functions of president and also naming him as head of the armed forces. He said the military council has no ambition to govern the country alone, adding the army wanted to return power to a civilian government. The political opposition denounced the military's takeover of control, and labor unions called for a workers' strike on the matter. Let's now look at news from a more intimate world around us, news beyond headlines.
Clad in a black wetsuit and pink face mask, Sin-Jo-hee's figure clearly parts the green-blue water until she abruptly dives below the surface, her purple fins disappearing into the deep. When she resurfaces a minute and a half later, her gloved hands grip 6 or 7 sea cucumbers, their spiked backs glistening in the sun. But climate change and environmental pollution have made finding enough sea life to harvest more difficult for Jin, Wu and others. Every year, the waters are a little less icy, warming as much as 2.6 times more than the world average, changing the undersea habitat and casting doubt on the future of the Haenyeo. As he runs alongside his owner, Kenty Larson, in Bucolic, Ure, Colorado, Dexter the dog inspires, smiles and then questions. The dog, who is about 6 years of age, runs on his hind legs after a car accident at age 1 injured his 2 front legs. After several surgeries and much therapy, he not only survived the accident but learned to adapt by using just his back legs. Now Dexter easily keeps up with Larson on her regular workout. In South Korea's western region, a vast canola flower field has been created near the Dangjin Habdeok Dike and the Sigmun National Industrial Complex. Yellow canola flowers are in full bloom on the lakeside. They give off the refreshing scent of spring in the wind. The flowers have bloomed along the 2-kilometer trail of the Dangjin Habdeok Dike. It is one of the 3 largest dikes built during the Joseon period and is a World Heritage irrigation structure. The yellow flowers combined with green willow trees grab the attention of locals and tourists. During the fasting month, there are plenty of choices for the breaking of fast, but a must-have for residents of Indonesia's Tangerang city are the treats from Asinan Betawi Ibu Sofi. Asinan Betawi is a combination of vegetables or fruits mixed with chili sauce for pickled fruit and peanut sauce for pickled vegetables. This sour and spicy taste is usually found in the Bogor city area. In Indonesia, one of the shops selling ingredients for cakes on the street of KH Abidin, Bengkulu city, the 6th day of fasting in 1442 Hijriah began to increase compared to the previous days. Israel Tanjung, one of the cake ingredient traders, admitted that this year's sales of cake ingredients had shown an increase since the beginning of Ramadan. When compared to last year, buyers began arriving a week before Eid. In India's eastern Mayurbhanj district, an injured snake was rescued and operated by surgeons. The Russell's viper snake that was trapped in a fishing net for 5 to 6 days was spotted by children, after which it was rescued and its wound was stitched. The snake was later released in the Biosphere Reserve of Simlipal National Park. Singapore's ambition to cut its carbon footprint gets a power boost. A new consultancy study commissioned by the Energy Market Authority will look at cleaner fuels and technology it can switch to. It will also find out how heavily the country should rely on them from now till 2050. According to tender documents, British consultancy Arup will conduct a study over 4 months to see how and which low-carbon options are suitable. It will also look at potential barriers and any changes to regulations needed. A newborn Sichuan golden snub-nosed monkey made its public debut at a zoo in northeast China's Heilongjiang province. The monkey baby, which was born on 12th April, appeared in the arms of its mother at the Longsha Zoological and Botanical Gardens in Qixihar City, Heilongjiang. The baby was carried by its mother, climbing up and down inside the enclosure in the sunshine of northeast China. The golden snub-nosed monkey is one of the 3 national treasures of China, with only 5 species of golden monkeys now existing in the world. A 280-meter-long giant kite took off to the sky on Sunday at an annual kite gala in Weifang city of East China's Shandong province. Designed with a dragon head and a centipede body, the kite is about 4 meters high, 3.6 meters wide and 280 meters long. It is known to be the largest one of its kind in the world. In Spain, nightclubs and clubs have been closed during the entire pandemic, and dancing is forbidden even in bars. No one forbids to dance outside, and people living in Barcelona gather every Sunday at a silent disco. Everyone is dancing, but you can't hear the music. Every Sunday, people in Barcelona who long for joy in this pandemic put their headphones on. The whole happening started as a hobby of small bunch of friends, and at its best, it has made over 200 people dance together. Some call it a Sunday mass. DD India.
Time now to turn on the time machine and see the importance of this week in history.
On the 20th of April 1912, Bram Stoker, Dublin-born author of Dracula, died. He began writing novels while working as a manager for Irving and secretary and director of London's Lyceum Theatre, beginning with The Snake Spas in 1890 and Dracula in 1897. It was on the 20th of April in the year 1943 that the massacre of Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto uprising began in the Second World War. A total of 13,000 Jews were killed. About half of them were burnt alive or suffocated. German casualties were probably fewer than 150, with Stroop reporting 110 casualties. It was on the 20th of April King Christian X of Denmark died in the year 1947. He was a member of the House of Glucksburg, a branch of the House of Oldenburg, and the first monarch since King Frederick VII to be born in the Danish royal family. It was on the 20th of April in the year 1999 when two teenagers went on a rampage at the Columbine High School in a Denver suburb in Colorado. The teenagers shot 13 people dead before taking their own lives. It was on the 20th of April in 2015 that a bomb attack targeting United Nations compound in Somalia's semi-autonomous Puntland went off. The terror group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. It was on the 21st of April in the year 1895 that the first movie projector was demonstrated in the US. Woodville Latham and his sons Otway and Gray demonstrated their Panopticon, the first movie projector developed in the country. On the 21st of April in the year 1910, American novelist Samuel Langhorne Clemens, known by his pen name Mark Twain, died. His masterpieces include The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Both these novels were drawn from his boyhood experiences. On the 21st of April in the year 1960, Brasilia became Brazil's new capital. Before Brasilia, Rio de Janeiro was the capital of Brazil, but the city was crowded, government buildings were far apart, and the traffic was heavy. So the government of Brazil decided to create a new city specifically developed to be the capital. On the 21st of April in the year 1975, the then president of South Vietnam, Thieu, resigned from the post. He stepped down after accusing the US of betrayal in a blistering attack broadcast to the nation. And on the 21st of April in the year 1987, over 100 people were killed after a bomb exploded in the Sri Lankan capital Colombo. More than 300 people were injured in the incident. Most of those who died were from the Sinhalese majority community in Sri Lanka.
All the glitz, glamour and drama from the world of showbiz coming up next.
It was a star-studded evening in Nashville in Tennessee at this 56th Academy of Country Music Awards show that was broadcast live to the TV audience. For the second year, the ACM Awards took place in multiple smaller sites around Nashville rather than the usual Las Vegas venue. The top prizes were claimed by Luke Bryan for Entertainer of the Year and Chris Stapleton winning Album of the Year for Starting Over. The women power was once again celebrated at the event as Maraine Maurice won both Female Artist of the Year and Song of the Year for The Bones. Gabby Barrett bagged the Best New Female Artist and a nomination for Best Single. Gaitan, a nominee for New Female Artist of the Year and the first black woman to host the ACM Awards show, performed her song Hold On with a gospel choir accompaniment. If you always hoped for an Asian superhero to enter Marvel's cinematic universe, then your wish has come true. Marvel Studios has released the first trailer of its upcoming Asian superhero movie, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The lead role is being played by actor Simi Liu. The film also stars comedian Awkwafina as well as Asian superstar Michelle Yeoh. The movie is slated to be released in theatres on the 3rd of September. It's a season of documentaries. One after another, documentary filmmakers are bringing out topics that are taking the world by storm. One such documentary series is Case 404. Starring actors and actresses with disabilities, the series Case 404 is due to air on April 27th on YouTube. The docu-series narrates the daily and often unnoticed struggles of people with disabilities in Egypt. The 15-episode series has been written by hearing-impaired screenwriter Ramiz Abbas. Another documentary, My Octopus Teacher, explores friendship between marine life and their terrestrial friends, the human beings. In the documentary, a human being and an octopus have formed a unique bond with each other. South African Craig Foster is seen forming a deep friendship with a wild octopus who becomes his life coach until its death. Foster in the documentary rekindles his connection with nature by observing a female mollusk. Forming a deep friendship, she shared her secret life in a stunning kelp forest every day for over a year until her death after mating and laying eggs. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
The 2024-25 edition of UEFA Champions League will follow a new format. We explain what will change, what will stay the same, what it means for fans and how it impacts UEFA's other club competitions. Everything you need to know about the revamped Champions League and more.
How many teams will be in the new Champions League? The number of teams will be increased from 32 to 36 in the new Champions League. When will the Champions League structure change? The new format is expected to be implemented for the start of the 2024-25 season. What changes will be made to the existing Champions League format? Aside from the increase of teams from 32 to 36, the biggest alteration is that the group stage will essentially be axed, replaced with a single league stage that includes all participating teams. Games will also be played on Thursdays instead of Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Each participating club will feature in a minimum of 10 league stage games against 10 different opponents, 5 home games and 5 away, instead of the usual 6 matches against the same 3 teams in the group. The top 8 sides will then automatically qualify for the knockout stage, with the teams finishing in 9th to 24th place facing off in a 2-legged playoff fixture in order to progress to the last 16 of the competition. These changes will also be made for the Europa League as well as the new Europa Conference League set to begin its inaugural season later in 2021. These 2 lower division competitions will also be expanded to 36 teams in each league stage. Qualification to the Champions League will more or less be the same, with spots earned through a team's results in the respective domestic leagues. DD India.
And as we conclude this edition of Global Scan, we are leaving you with the images that stayed in news this week. Take good care of yourself. Namaskar.